Hey Greg, how you doing today?
I'm fine, Danny. How are you?
Wonderful. I'm so
Excellent.
excited, seeing you here in this virtual room and starting kicking off our podcast, Cyber Wise Guys podcast. This is exciting. I ran a post on LinkedIn, and the the responses were so positive, and people are kind of waiting. So hopefully, we're going to have a productive session. But from my perspective, the whole cyber wise guys
Mm,
idea was to help, I'd say, cybersecurity practitioners, users, people
yeah,
that are interested in some, maybe even students and what have you. And like
yeah,
bring in the importance of cybersecurity and how people should address it, because it can be a little bit scary at times, right? When you kind of
yeah,
like hear about cybersecurity and everything that is going on in the news.
yeah.
So for me, that's why I wanted to get into this. I don't know if it's the same for you, right?
Yeah, Danny, I think a lot of it too is I consistently get asked the same questions about cybersecurity, AI, and where things are going. And so I think it's about time. And I think it's a little overdue. I mean, you and I really should have been doing this earlier, answering those questions for as a wide an audience as we can get. I think having our discussions about what we want this to look like, I think it's informative to say that this is really a podcast that everybody can approach. We have a little bit of something for everyone, for the new brand new person into cybersecurity, and then those of us who have been around for a while. So I think this is a really unique opportunity, and on Spotify of all things, also. So that's really blown my mind as well.
Well, there you go. So happy that we can put this together. And you obviously been in the cybersecurity industry for, say, quite some time now. I can say the same about myself, but um, I would love to emphasize, and I think it's important to emphasize, this is not about us and what we experience, right? We want to
Right.
make inform, or we bring technologies, solutions, threats, everything in and around cybersecurity, make it a little bit more approachable for people,
Right.
right?
Right.
And if even practitioners, because cybersecurity is such a wide field now, right? If we think
Hmm.
back of, compared to like 25 years ago when you had an antivirus and a firewall.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now it's cybersecurity is embedded not just in implementing a solution in an environment, but actually written into the code of the solutions themselves, right? And
Right.
how those products, how those codes are being written. So
Right.
security is always front and center. So if we can, in my mind, if we can bring in the hottest and most discussed topics of the day for our
Yeah.
audience, whether they're watching or listening in the preferred way, I think we would achieve something that people would like, and hopefully that would be the case.
Yeah. Just like you said, Danny, there are many approaches to cybersecurity because it's such a large concept that has to be embedded in everything. I mean, we're consistently seeing that new services and tools are being built with frameworks like
Yeah.
Zero Trust, for example, that
Mhm.
have a lot of applications in a wide variety of cybersecurity areas. So there is a large pool of data to pull from. And then where do you begin with all of this? I think one of my big challenges when I came to the cybersecurity field was, how do I get my head wrapped around all of this? And just like any uh, system of knowledge that has a large background behind it, it's not easy to do. And so my hope here is that we're able to clear that up at the early stages and help to lay a general understanding for our audience that we can then have a discussion about where do we go from here, and what are the new and upcoming things like AI and quantum computing, how are they going to have an effect here. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's important that we do this work with that idea that cybersecurity is a large idea factory for securing networks and just being safe when it comes to operating in the digital environment today.
So, which is fantastic. I think this is a great segue to maybe start talking about some the business. Right, let's go to the business side and why
Yeah.
we're here and talk about some not business but more content. You've mentioned
Mhm.
in your in the things you said so far. You've mentioned, I would say, three things that are kind of like on everybody's mind. For the past few
Mhm.
years, zero trust was a highly discussed topic, and different
Mhm.
companies have different ideas. But the few key elements, right, that would
Yeah.
be the common thread for all of them. So, if you don't mind, right, maybe
Sure.
talk to that end a little bit about. Zero trust and what it means and why
Yeah.
partners as well as obviously end customers should
Yep.
have zero trust as part of their strategic, I would say, or as part of their cybersecurity strategy.
Yeah. Absolutely, Danny. Well, first thing to say is zero trust doesn't belong to one particular vendor or organization. Zero trust has been out for a number of years now, and there are many different iterations on that. I like to use the one that was defined by Microsoft
Hmm.
when they actually have three main pillars to that. The first pillar is verify explicitly. So that really talks to the foundation of the cloud model, which is that identity is where it all begins. With that, the second pillar is least privilege. So not only do you have authentication, but authorization, only giving those individuals, those users actually, the authority to do what they need to do to complete their job and not an authority more. And the last one is segmentation. So you're assuming breach. So back in the day, and I say that 5, 10 years ago, what we thought was set up your VPNs, put up your firewalls, and let's really hope that nothing gets in. What we found out that egg approach is once you crack the shell, then everything is available to you as a malicious actor. So the third and most important part, I think, to the idea of zero trust is making sure that if we do have a breach, we have created these internal boundaries within our data so that one individual does not have access to everything, and that lateral movement and increasing your authorizations to do malicious things in the environment is greatly decreased by the mere architecture of what we've built based on zero trust.
Yeah. So it almost sounds like when you have or when you're thinking of implementing systems, security systems in place or
Hmm.
security solutions in place, it's kind of okay. Let me install a firewall, right? Let me make sure
Hmm.
my Active Directory is up to date with all of my employees and what have you, and everybody
Yeah.
has some sort of threat protection on their devices and what have you. But
Hmm.
as opposed to zero trust,
Yeah.
um, it sounds more like a way of life for an organization, just like a
Yeah.
process that um, it's a process, right? It's kind of like it's a more of a strategy rather than a solution.
Yeah.
Something that customers and partners alike would have to pursue.
Right. It's better to look at zero trust as a maturity spectrum.
Okay.
So if you're saying, well, I've achieved zero trust, well, you really haven't, because zero trust is not a place we get to, right? You can't say, well, I've enabled MFA. You can get to that. You can enable MFA. But zero trust is a framework. So you're never going to actually achieve it. The only thing you can really do is become part of the maturity model. How mature is my environment when it comes to the zero trust framework? That's really what you do. So all of these tools and services that are offered by vendors are not zero trust. And I partially that have that responsibility as well, as by saying that when I'm offering something like Microsoft tools or
Hmm.
services, I can't say this is zero trust, right? This is a tool that can help you achieve the
Hmm.
goals of the zero trust framework. But zero trust really is better to be thought about on a maturity scale rather than a place that you get to.
So it's a framework, and that you
Yes.
have to pursue and always and constantly, I would say, refill with different, let's say, assessments to know
Yeah.
where you are I would say, let's say, on a yearly basis or on a semi yearly basis. Um, what are some of the challenges? Sorry.
Oh, I was going to say that also Yeah, those are also great times to reassess your zero trust. You should be
Mhm.
doing it periodically, like quarterly or even bi quarterly,
Yeah.
whatever is appropriate. But I think also it's important to understand that whenever you have a change in your architecture, something very significant, you're adding devices, you're removing devices, you're adding new services, third parties come on. I think it's another good time to have that, even if it isn't in that scheduled reassessment.
So, which is phenomenal, and larger enterprises usually would have multiple teams, and and it's going to
Yeah,
be easier for them, or as you're
yeah,
well aware, government agencies and so forth. But for
yeah.
the smaller partners, right, the smaller customers,
Hmm.
that are in the field of cybersecurity, those things might be challenging. So, what are some of the
Yes.
ways that customers or users of cybersecurity that are interested in kind of, oh, that sounds interesting, and I really need to start thinking about zero trust as an approach and putting in a framework, like you said earlier? What are some of the
Mhm.
challenges that are facing today the smaller organizations?
Well, Danny, when I talk to SMB customers, the first thing that generally happens is there's a feeling of being overwhelmed, right? I'm asking them to do a lot when I present zero trust as a framework to them for their security posture. And they feel like, well, do I have to do everything at once? I don't have the staffing or the resources to do that. And that's okay
Yeah,
because again, what we say when we're talking zero trust is we're talking to them on a maturity model. If you start out and all you do is put in or allow for multi-factor authentication MFA policy, that is a good step. That's a very solid step in moving towards MFA. Then we take that one step at a time while making the environment more and more compliant with a zero trust framework, which of course then happens to be part of other compliance requirements such as the NIST 800 or any other HIPAA or any of these required compliance standards that they have. So the biggest one, right, for most SMBs that I see is really this overwhelming list and not knowing where to start. That's where I see them uh, come from, and then providing that one step at a time. Let's do this. How do you eat the elephant? One bite at a time. That's how we do that. We eat the elephant by taking that first bite, and it gets us closer to our goals.
okay. So basically, what you're saying, and I think most people would be aware of that, but it's important to emphasize that cybersecurity is a team sport, right? Uh,
Yes.
you have to reach out to partners and people that I would say established security practitioners and consultants and whatever to find
Yes.
the best match. And I would have to argue that, from my experience, more on the business side of
Hmm.
cybersecurity, what I've seen often is that people would usually go, users or customer and customers would usually go with the first consultant that comes their way.
Yeah.
But and it's not always the best thing. It's almost like, uh, the same way you are interviewing for a job, right? You're not interviewing
Hmm.
just one place, right? You would like to interview
Yeah.
um, with different companies, and vice versa. Companies would usually interview multiple
Right.
candidates to find the right fit.
Hmm.
My advice around this is for customers that are looking, or organizations that are looking for assistance, reach out to
Hmm.
multiple consultants,
Yeah.
to MSSPs, right, to
Right.
resellers that are selling different solutions. Learn from
Yeah.
them what they can offer, what kind of, not just solutions and different products from different manufacturers, but what kind of services they can provide. Can they
Right.
assess? Like, can they run a security a maturity assessment to tell you where you at the
Yes.
moment, what you're missing, and so forth. So from the business side, this is what
Mhm.
I see often, and when I talk to customers, right, that
Yeah.
would be my offer, right? So
Yeah.
thank you. This
Yeah.
is maybe this. I think this was a great start of the discussion around zero
Yeah.
trust and how that really affects uh, customers, right, and
Hmm.
organizations out there. The
I agree.
second, yeah, the second term, and again, obviously, our podcast is going to be available for everybody to
Hmm.
listen. So I certainly hope that people would reach out to you or myself, right, to get more
Yeah.
information and learn where they can find the resources that they would need to start having discussions and implementing the zero trust framework in their
Right.
own organizations. But you've mentioned earlier another, I would say, term. Let's call it term for
Hmm.
a lack of better words on my end here. You've mentioned AI.
Yes.
AI is probably the biggest topic, not just in cybersecurity, but all around now. You have
Hmm.
you have organizations like OpenAI, right, and Sam
Yes.
Altman, right, that are pushing forward with it very, very quickly. You have others like Elon Musk that are keep kind of like talking about the I would say the hazards and that entailed around it, or with the implementation of more and more AI based tools. But when it
Yes.
comes to, and again, for me, I always remember uh, Ray Kurzweil and his 2046 singularity date. It's a paper that I would highly recommend people to read, and
Yep.
definitely it always. I'm a bit of a science fiction geek, so with us
Not
with I
alone, sir.
so I certainly hope that Sam Altman is considering Sam Altman and the likes, I would say,
Yeah.
are considering the three laws of robotics when they're building up their AI engines and what have you. But putting that aside, right, we came together here to talk about cybersecurity. So if you don't mind,
Yeah.
right, obviously you have machine learning and you have generative AI. If you don't mind, maybe give our audience a little bit of a background on how we got here today, or like, of what was the
Sure.
process over the last couple of years that kind of like made this the most discussed topic of the day, if you will.
Okay. Well, Danny, I think it's important we go back just a little bit further,
Okay.
real quick. Yeah, I think we really start talking about where did AI come from originally, and it the first real AI that I think you could call it that, call it AI for now, but the real first computing application of computing when it comes to work would probably be Alan Turing and his theoretical foundations. So
Okay.
Alan Turing was really, he's known as the father of modern computing, and he's
Yeah.
really laid down those basic groundwork for all the theoretical computer science and AI that we have today. So he's very famous also for the Turing test, so being able to determine if you're talking to a human or a human-like intellect.
Yeah.
And he was able to apply that or those tools in his computer that he built to the Nazi Enigma encrypted messages. So that really was the very foundation. And then quickly after that, you see that computer experts across the world, or machine experts and cryptographers, started applying these. And of course, business and other organizations such as the military saw that they were able to automate things that used to take a lot more effort and had a lot more steps to them when done by a human being. So the science continued to develop because it was such an important issue or important tool to use. And so you get things like machine learning. There was an evolution that started occurring around the 80s and 90s with machine learning, where it was allowing systems to learn and adapt based on the inputs that were given to them so that they could use prediction and identification for anomalies, for example, in networks such as finance or in economics, human science, that kind of thing. So then you have from there you get things like deep learning and neural networks, which take that deep learning or that machine learning process and then begin to try to create a human brain like performance from that machine learning. Again, that increased the number of complex tasks you could do, and then allowed for where we are today. This natural language processing, these LLMs like ChatGPT,
Yeah.
GPT-3, really
Mhm.
that's where it really started for the last year or so. I would say even a number of 6 months, where it's really blown up to be something that is going to aid in specifically for us in something like threat intelligence, incident response, vulnerability management, you name it. And then looking forward from where we're going, there's new things on the horizon, the continued development of the chat GPT models, the large language models, and then the emergence of quantum computing. where we're going to see this exponential intelligence increase and uh, speed up for certain tasks that are be done, specifically when it comes to the math and sciences. So, and encryption for us, like it's going to be a huge deal is dealing with new encryption models because of the powerful quantum computing that's coming forth.
Gotcha. Well, I don't want to get in, and maybe we should keep the quantum computing conversation to to our next session, because that would be opening another can of worms, right? And we barely scratched the surface of AI. So you've mentioned, and you've mentioned a few, let's call them breakthroughs in
Mhm.
AI, but obviously AI, when it comes to cybersecurity, has two sides for that coin, right? You have the
Mhm.
adversary, right, and you have the defenders.
Mhm.
So, being a defender such as you are with your experience, what would you say are some of the challenges that organizations can expect, right, from adversaries using AI, right?
Mhm.
And what are some of the, I would say, methods and solutions implemented today by defenders against those attacks and adversaries?
Sure. So adversaries are absolutely using AI to increase their strategies and their tactics when it
Mhm.
comes to uh, their malicious activities. So let's
Yeah.
take a group like Forest Blizzard. That's a Russian military intelligence organization. They're actually using LLMs not just to develop code, but they're using it for researching satellite and radar technologies that are related to military operations. You take things like Emerald Sleep, which is a North Korean threat actor, also
Okay.
using LLMs. They do things like building content for spearfishing, creating
Mhm.
whole campaigns, and also understanding vulnerabilities that have just appeared on how to manipulate those and change those so that they're able to go beyond the defenses of a defender. So those are just some of the things that these malicious large language models are using. Also, there are these adversary tests, APTs, advanced persistent threats. They're using things like adversarial attacks. They're using AI to attack AI, right? So think
Mhm.
AI trying to hack ChatGPT. And even on the very beginnings of if you're developing a new AI, what they can do is the AI that they have can be used to poison the model or the data that is used to train these new models coming up. So they can then uh, poison that model so that it becomes vulnerable to something like a privacy attack. So they can then use specific prompts that they've built that can then access private information. So there's a lot of challenges out there, and a lot of misunderstanding about how AI, and especially when it comes to generative AI, how all of that works. So there's just very few of the attacks. I mean, there's many books written on how the challenges of AI coming up, but I think those are just some of the ones we should think about first.
Okay. And so, what would be some of the recommended, especially when we said earlier, that cybersecurity
Mhm.
is a team effort and you don't have to
Yeah,
go at it alone. And if you're a small
yeah.
business with not a lot of resources, so what are some of the mechanisms aside of maybe reaching out to a third party
Hmm.
cybersecurity expert, right, to come
Yeah,
in and help you, right,
right,
be your knight in shiny armor? What are some of
right.
the immediate immediate steps that maybe a smaller organization can take, right, to help defend
Sure.
themselves until such a day they feel comfortable bringing in a third party to help them?
Okay. Yeah. So let's assume that they're using a an AI to defend themselves against an AI,
Mhm.
right? Well, there are really three things that they will help them immediately. One is auto remediation, right? So we're talking about having an AI respond at the speed of AI, right?
Yeah.
They can assess what's happening, they can orchestrate an action or response to that, and then apply any patches at the speed of AI. So that's one of the first things. The second thing is a really an early threat detection. So when I was in a SOC as an analyst,
Mhm.
one of the things that slowed us down is understanding, did we have an issue to begin with? With AI, it's able to pick up these patterns much more quickly by understanding a baseline of behavior. And then from that, it's able to detect these threat signals. And then it will trigger a proactive response that will and reduce the risk that these new AIs, these malicious AIs, are now proposing. And then the last one is the continuous learning. So their AI systems are able to learn from what's happened in the past. Then it's able to then use those as lessons to change their strategy over time. So and then this agility, so this ability to flex and learn and change and morph as the threat morphs, really makes handling threats very efficient. So there's not much you can do about what they're doing. Like they're all of their looking at satellite data and all. There's not much you can do about that. What you can do is using AI especially if you're using it with community in a community with expertise. There's a lot that you can do, and the remediation, threat detection, and that continuous learning piece all can happen even at the level in SMB.
Gotcha. So I want to maybe ask you one question before, and then circle back maybe to the zero trust, to the beginning of the conversation with zero trust.
Mhm.
Um, now what? Let's talk about that, and then kind of like circle back again to talk about AI. So
Sure.
we spoke about zero trust. We spoke
Mhm.
about cybersecurity being a team game.
Yeah.
And now we spoke about AI and how adversaries are taking advantage of those tools and how defenders
Mhm.
can actually, what kind of steps users, right, and customers and organizations can take, what are the first steps. But in my mind, to kind of like maybe tie this whole conversation so far, um, it's cybersecurity within an organization is everybody's responsibility. So it
Yes.
starts from the user, and it goes all
Mhm.
the way up to right to the C levels, the owners,
Right.
and key decision makers. Right. So when we're looking at AI, obviously everybody's talking about, let's say, obviously Microsoft launched the Copilot a few months
Yep.
ago, right? And again, not just Copilot for security, but Copilot, which is, I would say, an
Mhm.
let's go a tool that helps customers achieve greater efficiency in their daily tasks, right?
Mhm.
um, and so when we look, and again, when I speak to customers and channel partners dealing with security, it's always kind of like, okay, we start from the head, right? We make sure that the owners and the C levels and the decision makers are aware of different solutions, different threats, right? And
Mhm.
building it down. But I would argue, in a sense of zero trust, right, that it goes up as well, right? So if you see something,
Yep.
you say something, right? If you
Yep.
feel like there is a phishing email in your inbox, right, you don't click, right?
Right.
You kind of like report it to your IT or your cybersecurity team to review.
Mhm.
So I'm wondering, in your interactions with customers,
Yeah.
what do you see more? Do you see it kind of like now with the whole hype around cybersecurity, things are trickling down, or kind of like things are pushing up, being pushed up in terms of the threats that are out there and things that needs to be, and solutions that needs to be implemented?
Yeah. So, Danny, I think the number one area for improvement for cybersecurity across all businesses, and I'll include this also on the enterprise level, is the
Mhm.
human factor. The number one way that cloud teams or clouds are cloud organizations, cloud-based organizations are compromised is they adversaries don't break in, they log in. So what we're seeing is phishing is and compromised credentials. Those are really the number one thing for those people who are on the cloud when it comes to compromising any kind of or in digital environment. So we have a lot of work to do on the human side, and that sort of goes all the way up and down, right? So we're talking anything from a general phishing campaign to something spear phishing, like they're looking for a person of some particular authority within an organization to really hit first. So that is really, in my experience, the number one thing we can do. How that is fixed is there are a number of third-party companies out there that can offer uh, training and what they call in-the-moment training. So, for
Hmm.
example, I do a phishing training campaign for my organization. I send out fake phishing emails, and if they click on those malicious links, then it takes them to some retraining, lets them know what they did wrong and how to avoid it next time. And I think that's key, is getting those kind of businesses involved with that, as well as building a culture of security, just like you're talking about when you said cybersecurity is everybody's responsibility, and absolutely is. Now, what can be done on the leadership side? What can we do higher in the organization? Well, I think there are several things that can be done. Again, taking zero trust seriously and making that cybersecurity a priority when it comes to business operations, right? In the past, I think it's been, we set up our business and do the things that we do, but we'll also check out security later. Right? Well, that can't be the way it is now. Security has to be integrated into of the operations that you do. Security is not the enemy of good business practice. It goes hand in hand with those items. So
Exactly.
if you and I think it's also understanding that just because you can't use one control in cybersecurity doesn't mean that you can't have compensating controls for that. Particularly when it comes to something more legacy, right? Some older app that can't handle some of the newer technologies. I think there are things we can do, and that's really working hand in hand with your particular security team, or if you don't have a security team, finding those experts out there, and they're out there, that can help you really reassess. And I think that's important. Earlier, Danny, you mentioned not just talking to one vendor. I think it's important that if you talk to vendors, that assessment aspect is going to be
Hmm.
very important. So you need to know where you're at. If that vendor you're talking to isn't offering you an assessment, then you're on your cybersecurity, and they're offering products for that, then you need to walk away, because you need to be able to assess where your weaknesses lie in the context of the risk that you have. So yeah, I think there's things that can be done up and down the chain, but the number one thing, if I could change one thing right now, it would be that on the people side, on us, you and me, and all of us who use email, being a lot more actually
Yeah.
aware of what we're clicking on and what we're doing when we're online.
Yeah, so thank you for that, and I think this might be a good idea for one of our next sessions to talk about
Yeah,
assessments and how important those are, and maybe
yeah,
those should be the first steps, right, for
yeah.
each organization, right, that is not already deeply into cybersecurity, and
And
there are
yeah,
so
and I think, Danny, too, a good thing to do with that as well is also talk about risk assessment.
mm-hmm,
Because really, what you're talking about when you're looking and you're doing an assessment is, what are the controls that we have in place for the risks that we say we need to defend against, right? So if you have something that is very important to you, a particular database, or you have a website, right, that becomes your highest risk. And so really discussing a risk matrix for us for the
mm-hmm.
organization, and then assessing against that risk matrix is very important. And I think, like you said, it would be an excellent discussion topic for us in a future session.
Well, and I think that it in recent years, and let's say in the last 2, 3, maybe 5 years, right, with the emphasis on cybersecurity. Sorry, not just cybersecurity, but cyber
Right,
insurance, right?
right,
This even becomes even more important, right? So
right.
we already had a lot of regulations for different industries, and
Yes.
those keeps evolving, right? Especially with the
Yep.
introduction of NIS2 out in Europe, and
Yep.
organizations that are going to interact with Europe, right, that would be
Right.
affected. But also in the past, I would say, let's say 5 years or so,
Yep.
the emergence of cyber insurance, right, and the
Yes.
requirement from the insurance companies.
Yes.
Having those equipment is definitely an important thing. So let's table that
Yeah.
for one of our next discussions. But
Sounds good.
before we wrap up for the day, I want to circle back down to the AI topic
Yep.
and get your thoughts on what are some of the I would say promising trend around AI, and how do you think those advancement will shape the future of AI when it comes to cybersecurity? Because to
Yeah. These.
me, and before you jump in,
Yeah.
to me, um, a lot of people think or imagining a day. I don't think this thing, but imagining a day where they can, you know what? I don't need Greg and Danny anymore, right? I have my AI system that will tell me what's wrong and will fix it at the same time. So I don't think that's going to be ever going to be the case.
Yeah.
But if you don't mind sharing your thoughts, that would be phenomenal.
Well, Danny, I heard somebody tell me about AI taking jobs. It's not the AI that's going to take your job. It's the guy with the AI that's going to take your job, right? So it's an argument
Yeah.
for, are you bringing on AI? But to answer your question, we can really expect in the next couple of years is when it comes to promising trends is something like, if you look at the burden of security, right? So having an efficient and effective AI will allow you to reduce the amount of security professionals you need. So it won't
Hmm.
completely remove but that security professional armed with an AI is able to make these strategic decisions and is able to threat hunt and be very effective, much more so than if he were just trying to do this on his own. Also, one of the exciting things for what we do, especially for me, is the strengthening of the cloud network. So when it comes to
Mhm.
security, AI is really going to be able to bolster this cloud security by doing things like really improving network traffic detection, really taking a deep dive into anomalies in behavior for both services and users. And it's going to be able to respond in real time. And again, I mentioned earlier before about AI time, right? AI versus AI. Those are going to
Yeah.
become very important. It'll be not 0 day, but 0 seconds, and so we'll have to have an AI that's going to be able to respond to that. And then you mentioned also that these new compliance requirements are coming forth, and they're just growing, right? And
Yeah.
compliance isn't going to go away anytime soon. In fact, it's just going to grow further and further. AI is going to allow us to come up with a plan more efficiently, right? Even if it isn't the exact plan we use to become compliant, it allows us to lay out a plan that we can become compliant to whatever standard we're using. It can take that large amount of data that exists in our environment and ensure that what we're doing in one area of our compliance isn't going to pull us out of compliance in another area. And it really will help to identify where we're adhering to the compliance standard and where we have potential violations. And also, I think more specifically, when you look down at something like zero trust, and AI will help with specifically the first pillar that I mentioned. It comes to explicitly verify. When it comes
Mhm.
to IAM systems, so it will really automate the identity and access management. It'll allow for a dynamic adjustment. So if you have somebody logging in and their context of how they usually log in, or their risk score, so if the AI is able to determine based on where they're logging in from, their behaviors, where the logging in resources are accessing, they'll be able to determine a risk standard and change the access levels based on that. So those are some of just the few things I've seen when it comes to security and AI within the next year, couple years or so.
Gotcha. Wow, a lot to think about, right?
Mhm.
And again, this is a team effort. Obviously, AI is just in its infancy when it
Yeah,
comes, not just generally speaking, but definitely when it comes to cybersecurity. I'm sure we're going to see a lot more advancement in the coming future, even in the
yeah,
coming month, right?
right.
So I'd like to maybe close this first session, right,
Mhm.
by promising that we will be back, right,
Yes.
with more interesting topics like we've mentioned,
Yeah,
assessments and why those are important, and obviously we're going to dive into other areas of cybersecurity.
Yeah.
It's cybersecurity is now everywhere or
Yeah.
within everything that is out there,
Yes.
right? For example, right, there are a lot of um, internet connected devices out there, right?
Right.
More than ever, right? And now more than
IoT is
ever, and
big.
it's
Yeah.
yeah,
Absolutely.
IoT is big, and I have some concerns, obviously, beyond the just IT side.
Right.
That I would love things that I would love to talk to you and some guests that will bring in the future. So,
Awesome.
um, with that, I hope we provided at least a glimpse and some interesting thoughts for our viewers and listeners.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, this discussion is going to be available soon on Spotify, and
Absolutely.
hopefully, yeah, I'm inviting everybody else, right, to or everybody else, everybody, the
Absolutely.
viewers, and to join us again for our next session. And I'd like to thank you, Greg, very much.
Thanks, Danny. Hey, we'll see everybody later.
See ya. Bye.